Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I never thought that going to the store with my son could turn into a nightmare. But that's exactly what happened when Karen crossed our path. It all started when I was looking for some new earbuds for myself. My son, Jamie, was with me and he was listening to his favorite music on his own set of earbuds. I was focused on trying to find the items on my list when Karen approached us. Karen was a middle-aged woman with a severe haircut and a scowl that could make anyone uncomfortable. She was accompanied by her son, who looked to be around Jamie's age. I didn't pay them much attention until Karen spoke to me. "Excuse me, young lady. Can you give my son your son's earbuds? He forgot his at home, and he really wants to listen to some music right now." I was taken aback. I had never been approached like this before. I didn't know what to say, so I simply said, "I'm sorry, but my son doesn't want to give his earbuds away." Karen's face immediately twisted into a scowl. "Excuse me, my son needs those earbuds, and your son is being selfish by not giving them to him. You should teach him better manners." I could feel my blood pressure rising. How dare this woman talk to me like that? I was about to say something back to her when Jamie stepped forward. "I don't want to give my earbuds away," he said that. Karen's eyes widened in shock and she lunged forward, trying to grab the earbuds from Jamie's ear. I quickly stepped between them, trying to defuse the situation. "Please, leave us alone," I said, trying to sound calm. Karen was having none of it. Before I could react, she grabbed Jamie by the waist, lifted him up, and started shaking him violently. "Give those earbuds, you little brat!" she screamed. I could see the fear in Jamie's eye, and I knew I had to act fast. I quickly grabbed Karen's arm and tried to pull her away from Jamie, but she was surprisingly strong. "Let go of me!" she screeched, continuing to shake my son. And that's when I saw an opening. Karen was so focused on getting the earbuds from Jamie that she didn't see me coming. I grabbed the half-full shopping cart that was sitting nearby and rammed it into her, sending her tumbling to the ground. The commotion caught the attention of a nearby security guard who quickly approached us. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking between Karen and me. She tried to take my son's earbuds and assaulted him. Karen was still on the ground, clutching her arm and wailing. The security guard quickly assessed the situation and called the police. When the police arrived, Karen was still shouting and causing a scene. She was demanding that I be arrested for assaulting her, while Jamie clung to me looking frightened and upset. I explained to the police what had happened and they listened patiently to my side of the story. One of the officers went over to Karen and tried to calm her down, but she was having none of it. She continued to shout and swear, insisting that she was in the right and that we were all out to get her. The other officer took my statement and then asked Karen for her side of the story. She told him that Jamie had refused to give her son his earbuds and that she had tried to take them from him because, well, she believed her son had a right to use them. The officer listened to her and then asked her why she had lifted Jamie in the air and shaken him. Karen became defensive, insisting that she had only done it to get his attention and make him hand over the earbuds. The officer then asked Karen to come with him so that he could take her statement in private. Karen refused, insisting that she wasn't going anywhere until I was arrested for assault. At that point, the other officer stepped in and told Karen that she had to come with him, whether she liked it or not. Karen continued to resist, but the officers were firm, and eventually she relented and went with them. I remember feeling relieved when they finally took her away. Jamie and I hugged each other, both of us still a bit shaken up from the incident, but we were also grateful that it was over and that Karen had been held accountable for her actions. A few days later, I received a call from the police informing me that Karen had been charged with assault and disturbing the peace. Apparently, she had continued to cause a scene even after they took her to the station, and they had no choice but to press charges. I wasn't surprised to hear that, given her entitled behavior in the store, but it was still a bit unsettling to think that someone could behave so recklessly and without regard for others. A few weeks ago, I received another call from the police, informing me that Karen had pled guilty to the charges and had been sentenced to some jail time and a fine. I remember feeling a sense of satisfaction but also a bit of sadness that it had come to this. Anyways, my boy is okay, I'm okay, and that's what really matters. This happened about a year ago. My wife and I were shopping in one of the local Walmarts. We were in the garden section and my wife wanted to try a garden grow and a few veggies. To set the stage, I was wearing tan sneakers, beige slacks, and a blue t-shirt. You know where this is going. But I was also in one of those riders since I can't walk very far. And my age is in the late 60s. My wife had a regular shopping cart, we were both inside the garden section, and she was going to the outside garden to pick up some cow manure, and I also told her to get some lawn fertilizer, but I told her specifically what I wanted. Those items were kept outside. I stayed inside to pick out some seeds, starting pots, and other things I think we needed. There was a woman in the same aisle looking at some potting mix. She was, I say, in her late 20s, and she had heard the instructions I gave to my wife as to what to get. She said, "Excuse me, sir. I know you don't work here and you seem to be knowledgeable, so could you please answer a question?" Well, after 50 years of work in retail, if the customer is polite, why not? Besides, I like talking to people. She was confused as to the potting mixes. I asked her what she's planting and what type of pots. I then made my suggestions as to which potting mix and why I chose it, what fertilizers to use, how much to water, and how much light needed. I was talking to this woman for about 15 minutes. She asked me how I have so much knowledge, and I told her that I have worked for Ace Hardware for 38 years. After she got what she wanted and needed, she thanked me many times, and she put everything in her cart and exited the aisle. I grabbed my seed starting pots and put them in a rider cart and proceeded to exit the aisle when I heard the screech of the Karen in the wild. I turned the cart around to face a woman in her late 40s to early 50s. Typical short haircut, dressed nicely with her arms folded and tapping her foot. "Hey, where do you think you're going? You spent forever helping her, so now you're going to help me." As I said before, after working 50 years in retail, if the customer is polite, I will bend over backwards to help. If not polite, well, I still had to help them, as it was still my job. She was not polite, and this was not my job. So screw it. Sorry lady, I don't work here. Don't lie to me. Of course you work here. You helped that woman and you were wearing the uniform. And why are you in one of those riders? Employees are supposed to be on their feet and walking, not using something made for a disabled person. She puts her hand on a cart and she tried to shake it. You need to get out of that thing and come help me now. At this point I was getting pissed. Several things, lady. 1. Anyone who wears a blue shirt doesn't make them a Walmart employee. 2. Anyone who's polite and asks nicely even if I don't work here, I will try and help. And you're not polite. She's now screaming, "Are you going to help me or do I have to get your manager and get you fired?" Me screaming back at her now. 3. And I'm using a rider because due to my knees and back, I have trouble walking and standing. She then grabs my one wrist and tries pulling me off of the rider while screaming, "We're finding your manager and you're going to be fired." She gave a good yank and almost pulled me with the rider over. I managed with my other hand to get hers off of mine and pushed her back. She screamed, "How dare you touch me?" She tried to grab me again when I screamed as I grabbed my cane. "Lady, you touch me again and we will have a problem." She stopped, turned and started to run out of the aisle with her arms waving and screaming that some employee was trying to beat her up and screaming for a manager. At that point, my phone rang. It was my wife as we were supposed to meet in electronics. Briefly told her what happened and where I was. A minute later, here comes the parade. Karen, store manager wearing yellow vest, an assistant store manager, also yellow vest, 2 blue vested males, plainclothes security, and one blue-vested female. I'm sitting in a rider with my arms folded. Karen is yelling, pointing at me that I am the employee who threatened her. The manager tells Karen, "This man here? Another rider?" Karen to manager, "Yes, that employee. I want him fired." I could see the manager look at the assistant manager and both of them rolled their eyes. I think they knew they had a nutcase in Karen. He tells her, "Ma'am, he is not an employee. He doesn't work here." "Yeah, he does. I saw him helping another customer and he's wearing a uniform." He tells her, "Everyone who wears a blue shirt is not a Walmart employee, ma'am." Now, where did I hear that before? "Well, he said he was going to beat me up and he also tried to assault me." Wow. Now I tried to assault her. The manager took Karen to one end of the aisle. The assistant was with me at the other end. The two blue vest males, one for each of us. During all of this, security with a female blue vest went to view the security tapes. They both came back after 15 minutes. Security was talking with the assistant and the manager came over. Security to the manager and assistant. I took the tape back to where this gentleman was helping a woman with potting mix. She left, then that woman, Karen, was talking to him. She grabbed his arm, was yanking on it, almost tipped him and the rider over, and he got her hand off of him. She tried to grab him again when he got his cane, and that's when she ran away. The manager asks, "Did he hit her with a cane?" "Nope." "Did he try to assault her?" "Nope." "Then why did she say that?" I answer, "Maybe because I told her that if she puts her hands on me again, we will have a problem." The assistant gave a choking sound after that comment, but the one male blue vest started to laugh and had to leave the aisle. Manager says, "The police should be here soon. Do you want to press charges?" "Well, yes." After another 5 minutes, 2 cops came in. The manager, assistant, security, and the cops went over to Karen and trespassed her and escorted her out of the store and into the blue car. The store manager gave me and my wife a discount for our trouble. This story took place a few years ago when my nephew was still a toddler. I was reminiscing about it recently and thought it might entertain some people on the internet. To clarify, my nephew is my cousin's son. My cousin and I were raised more like sisters and have been inseparable since we were young. So her children call me their aunt, and my children will call her their aunt. When my nephew was a toddler, my cousin enrolled him in a daycare so she could work. Initially, she left him with my uncle until he turned 18 months old. However, at that time, my uncle was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and became too ill to care for my nephew. During a conversation, my cousin mentioned that money was tight because most of her extra income was going towards daycare, where my nephew stayed from 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. I asked what she did between 12:30 and 5:30 and learned she was only able to work half shifts due to the lack of childcare. She had asked the hospice agency assisting her father for help with a 5-hour window, but they bluntly stated they were there to assist her father, not with childcare. As a single mother juggling work and caring for her dying father, this was definitely a challenge. Despite this hiccup, the hospice agency proved to be a great support later on. Believing in the adage, "It takes a village," I offered to pick up my nephew from daycare at 12:30 and care for him until her shift ended. I could manage my college coursework, which was online in the morning. The hospice agency was taking care of her father during this time, so there were no concerns unless a medical decision was needed. We never discussed payments, I just wanted to help. My cousin was ecstatic since she could now work full shifts, knowing her son and father were well cared for. This arrangement worked well for about 6 months. Then the daycare underwent a significant staff overhaul. Many older or near retirement staff were fired or let go, replaced by younger, often inexperienced workers. Suddenly, I started receiving calls to pick up my nephew earlier, as they couldn't handle him. Prior to the staff change, there have been no issues. The daycare would call my cousin first, disrupting her work, and then she would inform me. Often they called around 11 a.m. and when I arrived, my nephew was always calm and confused about the situation. Part of the daycare fee included lunch, which they frequently neglected to provide. Frustrated by the constant calls, my cousin confronted the daycare director, which was unaware of my nephew's early pickups. She demanded a refund for the missed lunches and insisted they contacted me directly. She expressed her concern that their actions could jeopardize her job, which seemed counterproductive. The director agreed to reimburse for the uneaten meals but suggested I pick him up at 11 a.m. instead. My cousin questioned the alleged complaints about my nephew, but the director refused to elaborate, citing client privacy. The reimbursement amounted to $50, and the reduced monthly daycare cost due to earlier pickups was $150. My cousin was still paying over $600 a month. Despite feeling the calculations were incorrect, we didn't dispute it, and I agreed to the new pickup time. This new plan worked for a couple of weeks until I began receiving calls at 10:50 a.m. to pick him up. I was often ready to leave when they called, as the daycare was a short drive away. After a few instances, I reminded them of our agreement. However, the director accused me of being late, labeling my nephew a problem child. She mentioned complaints from other parents but refused to provide details. I suspected they simply did not like my nephew, but were happy to take the money. When she threatened to involve my uncle, I reminded her of his critical condition and how inappropriate such a call would be. There wasn't anything he could do in his state, and it would only add stress. The situation was challenging, but it highlighted the importance of understanding and compassion in childcare. I had never been late to pick up my nephew before, contrary to her accusation, but I was about 20 minutes late that day. Now, I wish I hadn't been, but thankfully my nephew was fine when I got there. They had him sitting outside by himself, with no one accompanying him. The door was locked, and I saw no one looking out the window. At this point, my nephew was 26 months old, just over 2 years. I was livid, and that's not even the end of it. I picked him up, put him in my car, and waited for someone to come out and confirm I was the one supposed to be picking him up. But nothing like that happened. After waiting in the car for about 5 minutes, I took off. When I got to my house, I called my cousin to let her know what had happened. It turns out the director actually did call my uncle after she talked to him. He then called my cousin, panicking because the director was claiming my nephew had harmed other children, and there were complaints from parents, which my cousin and I were allegedly refusing to address. Neither my cousin nor I knew about this. I took my nephew over to my cousin and uncle's house. My uncle had started to calm down. I was relieved to see my nephew. I asked the hospice worker why she had given my uncle the phone, and she was upset because, according to her, the director made it sound like there was a medical emergency. She couldn't get hold of my cousin or me and was calling my uncle as a last resort. She swore she wouldn't have given him the phone otherwise, and felt violated and lied to by the daycare director. The hospice worker had even called her supervisor, not sure how to handle the situation other than calming my uncle down. My cousin left work early and arrived about half an hour after all this occurred. The hospice worker had just gotten a call back from her supervisor and put her on speaker so my uncle and I could hear. My nephew was watching a movie, paying little attention to what the adults were doing. The hospice supervisor was as upset as we were. She had a son about the same age as my nephew who went to daycare every day. She was also upset because the daycare had involved my uncle unnecessarily and had upset him the way they did. Her first recommendation was to call the police and report child abandonment since they had left my nephew outside with the door locked. She then recommended reporting the daycare's behavior over the past months to social services, especially since they were receiving state and federal grants. She herself was going to make a report to the insurance board because they had contacted my uncle despite clearly having a preferred contact, and my uncle was supposed to be an absolute last resort. My cousin and I both made calls. I to the police and she to social services. The dispatcher taking down the police report commented that it would likely be a he said she said situation since the daycare would probably deny the allegation. Fortunately, I had a dashcam, which I had activated upon seeing my nephew sitting alone. The footage was grainy, but the audio was decent, capturing my surprise when I turned it on. Then me picking up my nephew, putting him in the car, and waiting for someone to come out before the dashcam died. The police department wanted a copy of the footage despite its quality to corroborate the report, which I gladly provided. My cousin was transferred several times until she reached the Wright County Department to file her complaint. She discovered that she was one of several people complaining about that daycare. Social services advised her to also contact the police about finding my nephew alone, which I was already doing. They told her they had already started an investigation and would add her complaint to the growing pile. My cousin took a couple of days off work to spend time with her dad and son. During that time, she asked my nephew if he wanted to go back to the daycare, and he said no. When she asked why, he simply said they were mean. He didn't say much more, which made sense, given that he was just 2. I was about 2 weeks from my summer break from college, and I told my cousin not to worry about daycare. I could take my nephew for full days during the summer, giving her time to find an alternative. After my nephew's few comments about the daycare and knowing what they were doing to the adults, we weren't going to make him go back there. One of my cousin's co-workers later told us about a county program that paid me $700 a month to watch my nephew, so my cousin wouldn't have to cover daycare costs. We did this until he started kindergarten 2 years later, putting extra money in my pockets while I finished my bachelor's degree. And my cousin had a little more for bills and living expenses. The county, police department, and state insurance board each conducted investigations into the daycare. About a month after the incidents with my nephew, the daycare was shut down due to multiple complaints to egregious acts against children. I'm not sure what that entails, but I can guess based on my family's experience. I am not sure if any criminal charges were brought against the daycare or the director, but the DA contacted my cousin and me within a week of the daycare closing. They had wanted to speak to my uncle as well, but he passed away about a month after the daycare was formally shut down and was too sick to do an interview when the DA was asking for one. The building sat empty for about 2 months before another group took it over and put in another daycare. While there have been no complaints against the new daycare, I am not putting my children there. My cousin did not put her next 2 children there either. We will stick with family from now on.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.